Howdy folks, Donny Boy here, and welcome to my unit tier list for the Japanese faction in Age of Mythology Retold. I should probably start by saying this is going to be based entirely on my opinion of playing probably about 20 to 30 hours of the Japanese faction at this point, both on Titan and Ludicrous for the campaign. I've also done a small amount of the legendary Arena of the Gods Gauntlet with this faction, so I feel like I've got a pretty good understanding of this faction at the moment, what units are good, which ones to, I guess, avoid, and sort of where they sit in the tier list, so to speak. So it's probably also worth noting that these are obviously based on my opinion, but we're also going to be ranking not only from S to D, S being the best, but also from left to right. So units on the far left will be considered higher tier than those on the right hand side. So without further ado folks, let's begin with the commoner. So the commoner is basically the standard bread and butter villager unit. We only get one with the Japanese faction, and they are akin to the Greek villager. Basically exactly the same from a stats perspective. We have to put them in A tier for the simple fact that they are the lifeblood of our civilization. We need them to do pretty much everything. In fact, you could argue that they're S tier units for the simple fact that, as I say, they literally do everything for the Empire. Without villagers, you've got nothing, but they don't really attack. They don't really do, they're not really a unit in the traditional sense, but we'll keep them in the list and we'll put them in A tier because I guess there are some villager units that are better than this one and some that are not as good. Anywho, moving on to the first unit proper, the Yari Spearman. So this is our Spearman unit. Kind of run-of-the-mill, good against cavalry. I'm afraid to say they're kind of just D tier. They don't really... I mean, they're okay at taking care of cavalry. I wouldn't say they excel necessarily. And they're pretty meh at everything else, to be honest. So they are our D tier unit. They're kind of cheap and cheerful. They do their job of taking out cavalry, but to be honest, there's way better ways of dealing with cavalry in this game, if you ask me. So next up then, we have the Yumi Archer, which is your sort of samurai archer of sorts. I actually think these are pretty good. I don't think they're really anything other than a C tier, however. Maybe B tier. They are kind of better than some of the... I think they're better than Toxotes. I think they're better than slingers. They're better than the Norse spear throwers as, general archers go. But I definitely don't think they're as good as axe throwers, in my opinion. And they're also not a hero unit, so that kind of counts against them a bit. They're definitely not an A tier. I think they're a low-end B tier, potentially a high-end C tier unit. But they are pretty good. Their attack rate's pretty fair. Their damage is actually pretty strong. And they're pretty tanky as well. They've got a decent health pool. So I think they deserve to be a sort of, probably a low-end B tier unit. Moving on, we've got the Samurai, which is a very durable melee warrior. These are definitely B tier units, in my opinion. They deserve to be definitely on the higher end of the tier spectrum for B. I think they are probably one of the best infantry units, just like standard infantry. I think they pretty much match, if not excel, versus any other infantry from any other faction, especially when you consider Egypt's troops are nowhere near as good as these samurai. But again, they're also kind of base units for the most part. They don't do very well against myth units. And despite being durable, they are still relatively easy to kill. Alright, moving on to the first A tier unit now, and that is the Shinobi. I really like the Shinobi. I think it's one of those units that are they have a very high skill cap, and they are very risk versus reward. They're faster than any other infantry on the map. They are extremely good at dealing with archers, cavalry, cavalry archers specifically. So even chariot archers. I think the one thing they would probably struggle against is normal cavalry, like daimios, for example, and knights, and the actual bread and butter strong melee cavalry units. But other than that, they're pretty damn good. I wouldn't say these things are worth replacing your front line with, because they are pretty weak. As much as look at them the wrong way and they'll start dying off. In fact, they remind me a little bit of like Dark Templars from StarCraft 1 and StarCraft 2. Kind of high risk, high reward. They have quite an expensive cost to them. They're also extremely good at destroying buildings. So these are the kind of units you want to ambush your opponents, come in from the back line once the enemy has engaged with your troops, go after all of the archers, go after their cavalry archers, horse archers, chariot archers, those types of units. Or you can sneak them into the enemy base and try and destroy key buildings or villages. That's the kind of thing. They're very sort of sneaky units. I really like them. I think they're really good. Definitely worth building them into your army. Next up, we've got the horse archer. I believe they're called the Yumi horse archer specifically. Now, I would say these are on par with the Yumi archer. Essentially, they have the added benefit of speed because of their own cavalry. So you can kind of do a lot more kiting. Incidentally, Shinobi will hunt them down very quickly. Because of their movement speed, they can actually keep pace with the Yumi horse archer. And the amount, they literally two-tap them. It's pretty obscene how quickly they die to Shinobi. But other than that, against like a normal infantry army, you can pretty much shoot, run away, shoot, run away. The usual kite mechanics. They're pretty good, but they are obviously a lot weaker than the traditional Yumi archers when you look at sort of 1-for-1. But their mobility makes them better, in my opinion. It gives them a lot more flexibility, and it allows for some pretty awesome hit and run tactics. All right, next up we have the Naginata Rider. So I think this is a C tier unit. I think it's definitely a unit worthwhile picking up, but you only ever really want to get a couple of them. It's the kind of unit I would get if I've run out of favor and I need some frontline. Like, I need some frontline before I get my favor back. So for that reason, I'm going to stick them in C tier. They do have a purpose. They have a use on the battlefield. I just think they are too weak. They don't have the durability, but they are also cavalry units. So, you know, they definitely have a place for your typical run-of-the-mill hit-and-run tactics. I just don't rate them that much. But they, you know, in numbers, I've seen the AI use a lot of these, and they seem to swarm, kind of like the Zerg approach, and just send hundreds and hundreds of these things at you at a time. In that case, yeah, they're all right, but, you know, there are way better units in this faction that I think is a better use of resources. So next up, we have the first of the only siege weapon that this faction has, and that is the Oyumi, which is basically a large crossbow artillery. I think these are pretty good for, as far as siege units go, they're fairly average. There's nothing too crazy about them. There's nothing I would say, oh yeah, they do this really, really well. They're kind of just your run-of-the-mill siege units. They do seem to be relatively effective at taking out ranged units like archers and horse archers, so they've got that going for them. But yeah, I don't know. I don't think they're that amazing, to be honest. I think they're okay at best. Moving on to the Miko. So the Miko is our favor generator. She's also a hero. She isn't the best in combat, but she will take down myth units because of her multiplier. You can probably use her as part of a rush in PvP, because they will take care of myth units relatively quickly, and they're honestly probably the cheapest hero unit in the game. They only cost, I think, 50 food, same as a villager. They are needed, that you have to have them. You can't not get these. Essentially, the way that the shrines work, they generate favor by building shrines next to resources. The better the quality of resource, the more favor you'll generate, and the more resources, the better as well. So things like pig, sheep, all those kind of herdable animals, berry bushes, probably sort of on the lower end tier. You've got trees, which are generally pretty good favor generators, but gold's a good one. The more gold you've got, if you can put a shrine next to 2 gold and a load of trees, then that's probably going to be the best you're going to get, honestly. I think they're A tier. I don't think... Probably better than the commoner, in all fairness. Just because they do have some fighting capabilities, but they kind of serve the same purpose as the commoner, in the sense that they're there to serve a very specific purpose within the faction, and that is to generate favor. Moving on to the Bushi, which is our hero archer. Now this is where this faction gets really, really interesting, because I actually really rate the Bushi. I think they are up there. I think they're A tier units, honestly. I think they are the best archer unit in this game. And that's even comparing them to like the likes of Axemen. They're basically hero archers, so they have all the benefits of taking down myth units. I think they've got like a 10x multiplier against myth units as well. So they do like 100 damage a pop, so you get 10 of these, they're doing 1,000 damage per volley. If you've got 10 of these Bushis. It's pretty phenomenal just how quickly they'll take down myth units, especially in numbers. It's quite scary, actually. As archer units, they're actually pretty good stats-wise. They attack relatively quickly. I think they attack way faster than their alternative in the Norse faction. I can't remember what their ranged dudes are called, the ones that throw the spears. But that's kind of like the alternative, and I think they are way better than them. As an archer, they have all the benefits of the Yumi archer. I just think they're all around really, really good units. And in the Arena of the Gods, you combine these guys with the Gaia's Lashing Roots, and they become quite the killer machine with the AoE attacks. Obviously, not part of the normal kit, but still, it's something fun to add. So yeah, I think they're a very strong A tier unit. Very good. I build them all the time. Easily the best archer unit in the game, in my opinion. Next up, we have the Onimusha, which is the infantry samurai. I think these guys are really, really, really good. So much so that I would say they are probably one of the better units in the Japanese faction. I use them all the time. They are pretty much all-rounder infantry. I'd actually say they're better than hazers, and that is saying something, because I love hazers. But when you think about it, hazers don't do anything that the Onimusha don't, other than generate favor, but that's a faction thing. Their stats-wise, I think they're better than hazers. As a general rule of thumb, I think the samurai are actually stronger stats-wise than the hazers, so they're better at dealing with infantry. So the Onimusha, having all the benefits of being a hero, I just think they're incredible. They are really good. They even take down cavalry units. So why would you ever, in my opinion, why would you ever build a Yumi Spearman, or even a Nagi, remember the name, the Naginata Rider, when you can build Onimusha? They're just better in every single way, other than they just cost a bit more resources. But I'd rather have one of these than 3 of these or 3 of these. I think they would even win in a 1v3 as well. That's how good they are. Anywho, moving on to my first S tier unit now. We've got to talk about the Daimyo. The Daimyo is a really good unit. I think they are probably one of the best all-round units in this game. They are incredibly good. Essentially, they're a normal cavalry unit that's a hero. So I think they're like the hero versions of the Naginata Rider, except they are so much better. Like it's like chalk and cheese. They're completely different. They're tanky as hell. Honestly, they would easily take down these Yumi Spearmen, even though the Yumi Spearmen are supposed to have an advantage against them. I think they are one of the most powerful, straight up, like, tanks in the game, aside from, like, elephants, which just have a ridiculous health pool, just kind of like in a tier of their own in that regard. But as straight up units, they're not even that much more expensive than an Onimusha. And they're better. They're better than the Onimusha, straight up. Archers obviously have a hard time dealing with them because they're cavalry. They're not really, you know, in the rock, paper, scissors, cavalry trumps archers. Shinobis don't really stand a chance against them. In fact, there's not many units that 1v1 would actually beat them. I'm thinking of the elephant and myth units. Oh, but they've counter myth units because they're a hero, so elephants beat them. And maybe heroes, as in like actual character heroes. So yeah, I'm just gonna put it out there. I think Daimyos are probably one of the best units in the game right now. Straight up, they don't really have any weaknesses other than their cavalry. So spearman type units do have a bit of a bonus against them. But let's say you've got 20 Daimyos versus, hell, I'll be generous, I'll give them 30 spearmen. My money would be on 20 Daimyos, so they're not even countered, really, in my opinion. It's a pretty crazy unit. They're very durable, very tanky, they got good DPS. They're hero units, they gain all the benefits from being heroes. They're cavalry, so they've got the movement benefits you'd expect from cavalry units. I mean, they are just insanely good. Trumped probably only by one unit, and that's the next unit, the Mythology, which is, I mean, I don't really know what the devs were thinking actually with this unit. It's a bit busted at the moment. Mark my words, this unit is going to get nerfed in the future, nerfed into the ground, because what it can do right now is, quite frankly, unacceptable. Why would they make a unit? So this is a support unit for clarity. This is basically a support unit that essentially replaces the priest from Egypt, but is like 2 tiers higher. So it's kind of like a better version of the priest, which I can get behind. If you just left it at that and was like, yeah, okay, so it's a hero unit that heals and does ridiculous damage to myth units, I'd be like, yeah, you know what? That's a pretty good support unit. But it's like the devs had a checklist of all the, like, these are what we want to see in units. And someone read through the list and the other person was like, yeah, okay. What? All of them? It's like, yeah, let's go with all of them, see what happens. So let's just put this out there of what these things do. They're support units. So they're ranged, check. They're hero units. They gain all the benefits of being a hero, check. Anti-myth unit, check. Healer, check. Ranged AoE damage, check. Got crushing damage. They're against buildings. Check. Like, what? Why would you have a unit that does everything? It is literally like this is the unit combo, right? Daimyos, tank, damage, they do all the good stuff. These Mythologies pretty much do everything else that you'd ever want. Add a couple of Bushis in, jobs are good. And obviously, they are quite expensive. I think they're 250 gold a pop. So, yes, okay, they are expensive as hell. They're 2.5 times more expensive than a priest. And they do also cost favors. So, it's not like these things are cheap by any means. But what they can do is a little bit overtuned at the moment. They are just kind of like the do-everything support unit. And I think they are the best unit in the game right now. Like, straight up, I don't think there's any unit in the game that is better value than these guys. You could argue that single heroes are better, as in like the Arcantos and the Ajax type heroes. But here's the thing, you can only have one of them. I can have 30 of these. What are you going to do? 30 Omniogis and 30 Daimios. What actually is the counter? Someone tell me in the chat, I'd be curious to know, because Myth unit certainly ain't the counter. Against all of that, you could arguably say that, yeah, okay, you could use the Onimushas and the Bushis could potentially counter. Shinobi, yeah. I mean, I guess if you can get into the backline, if you can flank them with an army of Daimios or Shinobi, then yeah, okay, fair enough. They're going to disappear pretty quickly. Even Onimushas will deal with them pretty well. Onimushas even. So yeah, they do have weaknesses. They're not, they're not invincible, obviously, but they are pretty damn good and a bit too good for a support unit, in my opinion. Anywho, moving on to the ships next. So we've got the Wazn, which is the arrow ship. There's nothing particularly great about these, if I'm being completely honest. They're kind of like the run-of-the-mill arrow ships. I don't think there's anything that makes them any better than any of the other kind of arrow ships in the game. There's not even any like upgrades that you can get that would make them particularly good or much better. So I think they're just a C tier. I don't want to spend too much time on these. Again, the ramming ship, very much the same. They're kind of just... I don't really use them, if I'm being completely honest. I think these units are kind of meh. I understand why you'd want them. Obviously, they're your tanks, and they do pretty well against the siege ships and the arrow ships to an extent. But they're not particularly great, to be honest. This Junko Gosen, which is the siege ship, is actually pretty good. I'm going to have to put it, at the very least, top of the C tier. I'd actually probably go as far as to say these are a bit of a B tier unit. And I'd actually say they're probably better than these guys. Potentially. Okay, I'm going to caveat that. So with the Junku Zozans, the siege ships, if you go with Raijin, specifically that minor god, and there is a myth upgrade you can pick. It's kind of reminds me of the Chinese one. I can't remember the god, but you pick up a thing and it does like Maelstrom, like divine damage around it, which makes all their ships really, really good. Okay, well this is specifically for the Junko Zozan. And what it does is turns their normal attacks into chain lightning attacks. It's wild. It is absolutely wild. This unit with that upgrade, I think you can put it up there as an A, maybe even an S tier unit. But it comes with a caveat, right? Because you might not have access to Raijin, and or you might just not choose him. So it's a big old caveat. It's hard to be like, oh yeah, they're just definitely a straight up A tier unit, because as a standalone unit, they're not much better than any other siege ship in the game. But with that upgrade, they become a whole different tier of animal. They are, yeah, I don't even know where I'd put them. They're probably an A tier unit, probably top of the A tiers, maybe even S tier, because it is easily the best ship in the game with that upgrade. And that's the caveat, with the myth upgrade. Without it, they're no better than any other siege ship in the game. Moving on, we are on to the myth units next. So we're starting with the one and only unit from tier 1, age 1, the Kitsune. So this is basically the run-of-the-mill scout unit. However, so it doesn't really have any fighting capability. It's not really a myth unit in the traditional sense. I'm going to put it here. And the reason I'm putting it here is because it does have value. You can have... It basically has a passive that increases the movement speed of all of your surrounding units of the Kitsune by 5%, and it stacks twice. So if you have 2 of these in your army, you will increase the movement speed of your army by 10%. It's actually a big deal. The problem is keeping them alive and keeping them in the fight without them actually fighting. You literally have to put them to defensive stance and hope the enemy doesn't target them, because you so much as look at these things and they will die. They are scout units. For scouting, they are pretty good, to be fair. They are pretty quick and nimble units. They look cool. That doesn't get them any extra points, by the way. Just putting that out there. They do look pretty cool. So yeah, it's the passive is everything, in my opinion, alongside the scouting elements of it. But it's not a fighter, so yeah. Next up, we have the Kamataichi. I've no idea if I'm pronouncing that right. Even looking at the word, I'm struggling to pronounce it. But yeah, the little weasels, basically. These units are actually pretty good. I don't know if I'd put them B tier. I think they're definitely C tier. Actually, I think they deserve a little bit more than that. I think they're a low-end B tier unit. Now, the actual as a myth unit, they are weak as hell. They're very easy to kill. Before everyone goes off at me, the reason I'm putting them in here is because of their bleed ability. So when you upgrade them, the bladed weasels, they have like an AoE bleed attack. So these are amazing for like hit and run tactics. You can, in the middle of a fight, you can send them to like a load of archers or whatever. Even on the front line, you just use like 3 of these. They use their myth ability. You send them to the back of the army so they're not engaged in the fighting. And they'll do a ridiculous amount of bleed damage to all of the troops that have been hit by their AoE. It's actually pretty savage just how much damage they do. I genuinely think these are underrated myth units. I say, as fighters, they're not particularly great. But that bleed attack ability is everything. If you can master how to use that effectively, you can easily diminish the enemy army before they even get to the main fight. Or if you choose specific targets or particular clumps of units during an engagement, you can get some insane value out of these things. And it doesn't even matter if they die straight after, they're already bleeding. And it does a decent amount of damage as well. So yeah, that's why I put them as a low B tier unit. Man, I don't even know how you pronounce these things. The Wanayudo, yeah, no idea. The Bernie face skull guys. I actually do quite rate these things. I think they're pretty good. I think they are also a B tier unit, myth unit specifically. The reason being, they have like an AoE fire attack. They're very easy to kill. Very easy to kill. I don't want to... They are glass cannons, essentially. But what they do is they whittle your troops down. They do a little bit of burning damage. And they are extremely good at taking down buildings and walls and forts and things like that. They are really worth trying to weave maybe 3 or 4 of these into your army. Because they will actually add a lot of DPS. And if you can control them correctly or well and keep them in the back line, just let them do their little abilities every now and then, just whittle away at the enemy troops, you can actually farm a lot of DPS from these units. But also they can be targeted quite easily. I mean, let's be honest, a couple of Bushis will absolutely eliminate and devour these things. So, you know, make no mistake, they're not that good, but they can be worth factoring in, I think. All right, moving on to the Joragumo next. This is the old spider. Not a bad tank, but I don't think they're anything better than C tier. Now you can upgrade them. They do like a little web type attack and throw the enemy, but it's only one unit. Like I say, that they're relatively tanky, so it's not the worst thing to, you know, get a couple of these into the army there. They'll give you a little bit of survivability, sure. But I don't think I can really put them above C tier. I just don't think they're that good. They don't really do a huge amount of DPS. I think they poison, but it's not that potent. I don't know. In all my time of playing and having fought a lot of these things, I just thought they kind of died a bit like a witch. You know, they're just not that great. So I'm going to put them down. They're a good C tier unit, but I wouldn't go any further than that. That's my honest assessment of those. Tengus, on the other hand, these are really good units. I don't know if I'd call them an A tier unit, but I'd definitely call them top of the B tier list. I actually really enjoy using these things. They only cost wood, so normally, it might just be the way I play, but normally I have lots of wood left over. So these are really good units to be like, hey, I need a couple of extra units. I've got a load of favour because I got a load of Mikos. That's just the way I play. And actually, I could use a bit of more frontline. And these Tengus are really good. They've got a little fly charge jump attack that kind of gets them into the fray. Or you can use them to target backline quite effectively. They're not particularly fantastic fighters. They do a decent amount of damage, to be fair. But they're not like, oh, damn, yeah, these things are really good fighters. They're really, really powerful. But what they are good at is tanking. They're really healthy units. They've got a decent amount of defense and armor. And arguably they're better than Onimushas in the sense that they are tankier. But they're also a hell of a lot more expensive in terms of just the straight up resource count. And the fact they have quite a heavy favor cost. But I think they're a really solid B tier unit. If you want to pad out your front line but don't want to buy daimios or can't buy daimios for whatever reason, then yeah, I think these are pretty good frontline units to pick up. I do rate them. I might be being a little bit harsh by not putting them in A tier, but I think the highest possible tier B is where I put them. Next up, we have the Raiju. Now, ooh, this. I tell you what, Raijin as a sub-god is really good. Even his, like, technology upgrades are pretty damn good. Raijins, do I put them? I think they're an A tier unit. I genuinely believe these are A tier units. They might not be the healthiest, they might not be the tankiest, but these things are pretty damn good in a fight. They're really, I'd say they're pretty decent as being frontline. I also think they have a serious amount of utility with their kind of ragdoll attack. It's probably not the right words, but essentially they just knock everyone for 6. If you've got like 5 or 10 of these, they can constantly keep like knocking the enemy army away. It's pretty obnoxious, the things you can do with these Raijus. Arguably, you could say the Onimushas might be better. But I will say I don't think they have the health pool that really competes with the Raijus as a pure frontline unit. I definitely don't think they're good as daimios. But I think they're a solid top A tier unit for sure. I really like them. I really rate them. Me likey. Next up, we've got the Oni. I'd really like the Oni. I think they are probably the best tank in the game right now. Arguably, Raijus have more utility with their knockback attack. But the fact that Onis do so much damage to buildings, so they're a good old crushing unit. They're kind of like a Cyclops, but like way tankier, way more healthy. I just really like them. I think they're such a good pairing with like Bushi. They're really good pairing with daimios. They're a really good pairing with Onimusha. Not Onimusha. Omnioges. That's the priest dudes. Yeah, I really do appreciate how good the Oni are. And they do a hell of a lot of damage as well. When you upgrade them, they're kind of like power up. Makes them do a significant damage against pretty much everything. But obviously they're extremely susceptible to hero units. Anyway, moving on. We have the Hungeo next. I think that's how you pronounce it. Could be wrong. Could be butchering that for all I know. But the Hungeo, or Hunigeo. Do you know what? I really don't rate these. They have over 1,000 hit points, so you think, oh yeah, really good tanky unit. These are good. I don't think they are. I think arguably they're maybe. I think maybe they're slightly better than the ramming ship. I'd certainly, if I was going to pair a tank with my arrow ships and siege ships, Hungeos are not a bad choice. I definitely use them over ramming ships, let's put it that way. But they're not that great. They don't really do much damage. Yes, okay, they do, I think, knock units around, as in C units. But they just, considering how much health they have, it's like they've got no armor. It's like they forgot to put any armor on this thing, and I believe it's meant to be the alternative to the siege turtle. Or sea turtle, whatever it's called, from Egypt. And, it's just not. It's just not. So yeah, that's kind of where I kind of place the Hongeo. It's an alright tank, better than the Ram. That's about as far as I'll put it, really. Alright, moving on to the tier 4 myth units next. We've got the Azura, which is... it's an interesting unit. I think it's definitely high-end B tier. I thought these were going to be like really, really powerful. Like in terms of like what they look like, they kind of feel like they should be better. And that might sound a bit harsh. It might just be because of the way that I play with lots of heroes. But I just found they just died way too fast. And it's not to say they've got like a low hit point pool. I'm pretty sure their health pool is over 1,000. The problem is, against hero units, and because hero units are so easy to obtain with the Japanese faction, they just don't really do much. I think I've got to put them above the Tengeyo, actually, or the Tengu. I think that's a better placing, but still, I honestly can't put them in an A tier. I don't know what it is. Their damage is alright. They can attack whilst moving. Like, they've got a lot of things going for them. I don't think their DPS is as high as it needs to be. I don't think they're as tanky as they need to be. They're just alright. And to be honest, they're very expensive. So why would I go for those over things like, I don't know, Oni, which is a way better tank. I've got the Onmyojis, which are better at doing DPS than the Azuri anyway, or Ashura. Hell, even the Bushi probably do more damage. I don't know, it's just... they're also quite expensive on the population cap as well, if I remember rightly. I don't know, I don't know how I feel about them. They're alright. Nothing really to shout home about. In my own experience. Other people might have very different experiences than me on those guys, but for me, the Azura just aren't quite it. Next up, we've got the Shinigamis. Now, these units I think I've very much slept on throughout my playthrough. I think these are up there as an A tier unit. I might even be underplaying them a little bit because they are very easy to kill, which was my kind of initial thing. It's like, wow, these things are a bit weak. But actually, when you upgrade them, their damage and DPS is actually pretty nuts. I think it's my understanding of how strong these units were came about when I was doing Mission 7, the Red Keep on Ludicrous. I was doing like a bit of a test run. I was sending my entire army, which was massive, fully heroes. I was like, yeah, no problem. We'll just smash through any myth units they've got. And then just an army of like 20 Shinigamis turned up. And they just destroyed everything. And I'm like, okay. That's interesting. So, yeah. I think it's their, I don't even know if it's a breath attack, the scream, their wail. Kind of like their banshee attack, if you will. Seems to be really damn powerful. Like, really, really powerful. That is what seems to be doing a lot of the DPS. Obviously, the lightning is also pretty damn good. And when you kill them, they come back. They're a very tricky unit to deal with. I think I might be underplaying them a little bit, actually. Oh, man, where do I place these? This is the one unit I was, even when I was kind of thinking about where I'd be placing stuff, this was the one unit I was like, I don't actually know. I don't think I've put enough time into them. I don't think I've used them myself enough to really put them properly in this tier list. Because I think they are really, really, really good. They're good against just about everything. And when you get a decent, like a critical mass of them, I'm going to say it's probably about 6 or 7. They kind of just wipe everything out. But I don't have the experience, unfortunately, to be like, yeah, these are definitely A tier. These are definitely S tier. I think they're a very high-end A tier unit. I definitely think they're better than the Omamushas and the Bushis. They might even be better than Daimyos. Honestly. Yeah, I'm gonna leave it as a high-end A tier. I think the Oni and the Raiju serve their roles perfectly. The Shinigami is a glass cannon. It is the epiphany of glass cannon. But if you get enough of them, they can absolutely change the course of a fight. But as individual units, they're not... Oh wow, they're amazing. So yeah, I think that's justified for me. Next up, we've got another unit that I haven't had a huge amount of experience with. The enemy rarely built them, and to be honest, neither did I. They're called the Onamaraki, which are flying birds. They do a very insignificant amount of damage, in my opinion. They're very easy to kill. I mean, 5 or 10 Bushis will pretty much kill it in 1 or 2 volleys. They got a decent hit point pool. They're very expensive. The upgraded versions do have an ability where they can summon a bunch of wretches, which does add value to them. However, they're like 3 units. They're kind of really easy to kill. I guess if you had 10 of them, you could probably spawn a pretty massive army and cause some problems. You could probably send them into, like, in PvP, for example, you could probably send them into the enemy base and start harassing villagers. I don't dislike them. I'm just not sure where they sit. I think we have to put them as a decent B tier unit. I just don't think I can put them any higher than that. Like, for me, the Tengu have more impact. But again, I haven't had the most experience with these things, so I'd be curious to see what you guys think. Maybe I'm losing my mind and just missed a trick with these things, but for their cost and honestly what I saw when I came across them, I really just didn't think much of them, if I'm being honest. So yeah, that's kind of where I have to put them. I kind of just think they're okay. They're kind of just okay. And then we have the final myth unit, the Umibozu. Now the Umibozu is actually pretty damn good in my opinion. Personally, I don't think it's an A tier unit. I think it's far too slow for that. But what I do think is that it's a good B tier unit. Probably the best B tier unit. So let's analyze why I think that. First off, it can walk on water and it can walk on land. It's a hybrid, basically. I don't think there is any other hybrids. Oh, apart from the war turtle from Egypt. I think, no, it's not. It's the sea turtle from China, actually, that's the unit that can go on both land and sea. So in that regard, this thing's very similar. It's extremely tanky, has well over 1,000 hit points. It is actually genuinely quite tanky. It doesn't have the most armor, granted, but it will tank a good number of hits. They're really useful to have in your army, but they are very, very, very slow moving. Like, they are probably one of the slowest moving units in the game. Like, they're slower than siege weapons, which is kind of funny. They do an alright amount of damage. I think it's like 50 hack damage. So it's not like, oh yeah, that's crazy, but you know, they're pretty decent. I think the main thing is they're good frontline units. And they have a teleporter, which is actually pretty fun. They're very good on sea. I mean, they kind of make the Hungeos look like Kitsumes in comparison. They're just not that good, the Hungeos. But the Umibozus, very good. I think if you want to pair a tank with your arrow ships and your siege ships, then Umibozus are definitely the units to pair them with. They'll do all the tanking that you want. They can teleport into the back line of the enemy ships and target what you want. They're good at hunting down transport ships. They're good on land. They're good on sea. They're just really solid units, to be honest. I really like them. I've got a lot of respect for them. And I use them a lot during my playthrough. So yeah, they have my respect. High-end B tier unit. I don't think they're quite A tier, but I think a solid B tier is the right placing for them. And that, my friends, will pretty much conclude my unit tier list for the Japanese faction. The only unit I'm still on the fence with is the Shinigami, and I'd love to hear your thoughts on where you think the Shinigami should be placed. It's definitely possible that the Shinigami is an S tier unit. I just haven't used them enough to be like, say that with confidence. Whereas the Daimyo is definitely an S tier unit, as is the Omnioji, which I think is the best unit in the game right now. But the Shinigami is definitely up there. Definitely up there. I'm going to leave it as that. I'm not going to mess around with it any further. This is my tier list. But anyway, folks, that will right about conclude this video. I hope you all enjoyed it. I hope you enjoyed my explanations as to why I've put everything where I've put them. I also am very curious to see if you agree with me, disagree with me, think I'm losing my mind, or any other comments you may have in the comment section below. Very curious to see what you guys think. But yeah, thank you all so very much for tuning in. I hope you enjoyed the video. If you did, please do give it a thumbs up. If this is the kind of content you enjoy, then please do consider subscribing to the channel. It does help support the channel, be greatly appreciated. Do let me know your thoughts in the comment section below. And as always, I shall see you in the next video.